Sophie Cunningham didn't just comment, she erupted. As the news broke that Terry Rozier would keep his full $26 million salary despite facing federal gambling charges, Cunningham unleashed a brutal takedown of the system she sees as broken. Her criticism wasn't limited to Rozier. It was aimed directly at the culture of professional sports that, in her words, rewards power and ignores principle. She pointed to everyday people, soldiers, teachers, and food pantry workers.
If you're here for the real story and not the filtered version, subscribe. And if you're sticking around for the next meltdown, you better definitely subscribe.
Who serve with dignity yet struggle to make ends meet, contrasting it with athletes under federal investigation still cashing million-dollar checks. Her frustration struck a nerve, igniting a firestorm that went far beyond basketball. At the heart of Cunningham's outrage lies a raw question: who gets to be held accountable and who doesn't? The NBA's decision to clear Rozier internally, even while the federal government presses serious charges, has raised serious doubts about league integrity and transparency. The timing, coinciding with congressional scrutiny, has only intensified the pressure. For many, this isn't just about one player or one paycheck. It's a spotlight on the widening gap between how justice is handled in public institutions versus private leagues. Cunningham's voice echoes a larger demand for truth and fairness in a system that too often avoids both. Life isn't fair. That's not a frustrated tweet from a random fan. That's WNBA player Sophie Cunningham, blasting out her fury to the internet after learning that NBA guard Terry Rozier is still cashing checks, millions of dollars worth, despite being hit with federal gambling charges. The number? $26 million. That's how much money Rozier is still set to receive, fully intact, while standing under the weight of serious legal heat. And if you're confused, you're not alone. Because how does someone accused in federal court of something this severe still get paid like nothing happened? And more importantly, why is no one in charge doing anything about it? Let's be clear. This isn't just about one player and one paycheck. This is a direct shot at the entire system of professional sports. And Sophie Cunningham wasn't having any of it. The controversy lit up when Cunningham took to social media and basically said what a lot of people were thinking. If someone facing federal charges can still collect tens of millions of dollars from their league, then what message does that send? While first responders, food pantry workers, and deployed military troops struggle to survive on modest salaries, this is what fairness looks like in professional sports. The backlash was instant and fierce, because Sophie wasn't just making a spicy comment. She was poking at a wound the sports world has tried to ignore for years: the disconnect between league accountability and actual consequences. The NBA's response? They launched an internal investigation and cleared Rozier. Let that sit for a second. A league's own internal review came up with a completely different conclusion than a federal investigation. The feds say gambling violations. The NBA says nothing to see here. So who are we supposed to trust? If the NBA says their hands are clean but the federal government is pursuing criminal charges, then what kind of investigation was the league actually running? Because from the outside, it looks a whole lot like damage control, and not a very convincing one at that. Cunningham's post tapped straight into that frustration. She wasn't trying to litigate Rozier's guilt or innocence. She was calling out the double standard. Athletes get slapped on the wrist or worse, protected, depending on their star power and the league's PR priorities. And fans? They're expected to just go along with it. But Sophie wasn't just tweeting into the void. Her comments hit at the exact same time the NBA was under fire in congressional hearings, where lawmakers were already questioning the league's conduct, transparency, and policies around investigations. The timing couldn't have been worse for the NBA, or better for Cunningham's message to resonate. As if that wasn't enough chaos, Rozier's legal issues aren't some minor slap on the wrist. We're talking federal charges, brought by the same system that has a staggeringly high conviction rate. Once those charges are filed, the odds aren't looking good. And if Rozier ends up convicted, that $26 million payday is going to age like milk. Yet, here we are. He's still on the payroll, still in the league, and everyone's supposed to play it cool. The conversation quickly spiraled beyond Rozier himself. Sophie's outrage amplified a much bigger question. Why is there such a drastic divide in accountability between male and female athletes? and between different levels of visibility in the sports world? Because let's face it, if this had happened in the WNBA, would the players still be active? Still getting paid full salary? Would league officials be backing them up like nothing's wrong? Highly doubtful. The gender pay gap in sports isn't news. But this threw gasoline on the fire. Here's a man accused of federal gambling crimes, who could potentially end up in prison, but he's still making more in one season than an entire WNBA roster combined. And that's not even hyperbole. Cunningham wasn't subtle. Her comments framed the disparity in brutal terms. Troops, food pantry workers, teachers. People working day and night to help their communities, while someone accused of breaking federal law is raking in life-changing money with zero hesitation from the league. Fairness? Integrity? Not even close. But things got even messier when Sophie extended the discussion to player empowerment. Specifically, she argued that star players like Caitlin Clark should have more influence over team decisions. And that cracked open a whole new debate. Because while some fans supported Cunningham's push for star player input, especially in a league where visibility and attendance are heavily driven by marquee names, others pointed out that this kind of empowerment hasn't always translated into wins on the court. The Caitlin Clark experiment has already sparked polarizing reactions, with critics arguing that giving players too much power can destabilize teams, especially when the chemistry isn't there yet. Still, the larger point remained. Players, particularly women, are often left out of critical decisions, and when they do speak up, they're labeled as difficult or entitled, even when they're just asking for the same influence their male counterparts have enjoyed for decades. Cunningham's stance didn't sit well with everyone, but it cracked open a conversation that needed to happen, especially when it comes to how much say athletes have, not just in team rosters, but in holding their leagues accountable. Meanwhile, the NBA's stance on Rozier continues to raise eyebrows, because if their internal investigation was so thorough, how did they miss what the feds apparently found? And why do leagues keep insisting they can police themselves when history shows they almost never get it right? The contrast between the NBA's cleared status and the federal charges isn't just a bad look. It's a flashing red warning sign, one that says, we care more about optics than accountability. And the public is catching on, fast, because this isn't just about sports anymore. It's about trust. It's about whether powerful institutions can be relied on to hold their own accountable, or whether they'll always protect their stars at any cost. And the cost is not just financial. It's moral. It's societal. It's a glaring message that if you're talented enough or profitable enough, you can walk through fire and still come out with a paycheck, and a press release saying no wrongdoing found. Cunningham's outrage struck a nerve for a reason, because it's not just about one case or one league or one tweet. It's about the bigger picture, the blurred lines between fame and justice, the way some athletes are shielded while others are silenced, and how the rest of us are expected to pretend that's not a problem. The NBA might be hoping this all blows over, but it won't. Not when people are paying attention. Not when athletes like Sophie Cunningham are using their platforms to push back. And definitely not when the government is involved. Rozier's legal battle is still unfolding. Maybe he'll beat the charges. Maybe he won't. But the real damage is already done. Not just his reputation, but to the league's credibility. Because if the NBA says he's innocent, and the feds say he's not, someone's lying, or someone's not doing their job. And Sophie Cunningham? She's not going to shut up about it. Neither should we. So let's hear from you. Do you think leagues should be able to conduct their own investigations without outside oversight? Should players facing federal charges be suspended without pay until the case is resolved? And what about player empowerment? Does a star like Caitlin Clark deserve more say in her team's direction? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Like, if you're tired of the double standards. Share if you think this conversation needs to go beyond sports. And don't forget to subscribe. We've got a lot more chaos to unpack. While the Terry Rozier case continues to hang over the NBA like a storm cloud, the conversation isn't slowing down. If anything, it's becoming something way bigger than just one player's legal trouble or one athlete's rant on social media. It's turning into a full-on referendum on the entire structure of professional sports. And the public? They're watching every move. Let's talk about the presumption of innocence argument that keeps coming up in Rozier's defense. Sure, legally speaking, Rozier is innocent until proven guilty. That's how the justice system is supposed to work. But here's the problem. In the world of public perception, in the billion-dollar spectacle that is pro sports, that line is way blurrier. Think about how fast leagues are to suspend players for way less. There are guys who've lost endorsements over a tweet. Players benched for conduct detrimental to the team because they missed a meeting or argued with a coach. But a federal gambling charge? Apparently, that's fine. No suspension. No delay in payment. Business as usual. Make it make sense. Sophie Cunningham's anger isn't just emotional. It's rational. She's calling out a system that seems to apply justice based on convenience and star value. Rozier brings in fans. Rozier helps win games. So Rozier gets to keep collecting that $26 million while the rest of us sit here trying to understand how that adds up. Meanwhile, WNBA players like Sophie, and honestly, every athlete who isn't protected by the PR force field of Legacy League, have to operate in a completely different reality. One mistake, one misstep, one opinion too many, and the league, the media, and the public will come down hard. The double standard is loud, and it's not subtle. And let's not forget the timing of all this. Right as Cunningham was speaking out, the NBA was being dragged into the spotlight by Congress. Yes, actual congressional hearings were underway, focused on whether these leagues are doing enough to enforce rules, uphold transparency, and maintain integrity. So while NBA reps were insisting everything was fine behind closed doors, the federal government was like, actually, we found enough to press charges. The disconnect is brutal, and it's dangerous. Because if leagues are allowed to operate like private kingdoms, with their own rules, their own investigations, their own conclusions, then what's the point of accountability at all? Cunningham's comments came at the exact moment people were ready to listen. Because this isn't about being anti-NBA or anti-Rozier. It's about being pro-truth, pro-fairness. And if sports fans can't trust that a league will do the right thing even under pressure, then what can they trust? But this drama didn't stop with the money or the legal process. Oh no, Cunningham took it one step further and lit up another fire when she spoke about player empowerment. Specifically, she said that stars like Caitlin Clark should have more say in team decisions. Cue the backlash. Some people agreed instantly. Clark is a generational talent. The WNBA owes a massive spike in ratings and merch sales to her name alone. So yeah, it makes sense that someone like her should have a bigger voice in shaping her team's future. But not everyone saw it that way. The critics? They fired back hard. They argued that giving too much power to one player, especially a rookie, is a slippery slope. They pointed performance inconsistencies, rookie growing pains, and warned against turning team sports into star-driven chaos. And you know what? That debate is valid. There's a real conversation to be had about balancing respect for coaching and team structure with player influence. But the underlying issue Sophie was addressing wasn't about Caitlin Clark specifically. It was about how leagues treat star power when it's convenient and ignore it when it's not. The NBA has always catered to its stars. LeBron James has been shaping rosters for over a decade. Kevin Durant, Steph Curry, even rookies with big followings, these guys get heard. So when Sophie says women athletes deserve that same level of influence, she's not being radical. She's being consistent. But because she's a woman saying it, cue the criticism. It's just another layer to this whole saga, the way we hold male and female athletes to totally different standards. Cunningham calls out systemic issues. She's dramatic. She wants more say for the top players. Suddenly, she's entitled. And Rozier, he's literally under federal investigation and still gets to show up like nothing's wrong. The silence around him? Deafening. This isn't just hypocrisy. It's structural. And it's exhausting. But here's where things get even more twisted. The league's defense of Rozier rests on the idea that their internal investigation cleared him. But what exactly does that mean? Did they interview witnesses? Subpoena records? Match what they found to federal evidence? Probably not. Internal investigations often aren't about uncovering the truth. They're about containing damage. So when the NBA says, we didn't find anything, What they really mean is, we didn't want to, because if they had found something, what then? Suspend a key player? Admit the system failed? Open the floodgates for other investigations? No way. It's safer to say nothing. Pretend everything's fine. Pay the man and move on. Except people like Sophie aren't letting them move on quietly. And neither are fans, because the situation touches a nerve that goes beyond basketball. It's about fairness. It's about whether justice is just a performance. And it's about whether sports leagues, which make billions off athletes' backs, are willing to actually protect the integrity they constantly brag about. The fallout from this isn't going to be immediate. Rozier's case could drag on for months. The NBA might stay quiet, hoping everyone forgets. But the precedent has been set. And Sophie's message has already done what it needed to do. It forced people to look twice. It made people ask the hard questions. Like, why is the standard of accountability so low when there's money on the line? Why are women athletes punished for being outspoken, while men get protected even during criminal investigations? Why do leagues still think they can handle everything in-house when the stakes are this high? And maybe the most uncomfortable one of all, will we actually value more justice or talent? The truth is, Terry Rozier may or may not be found guilty. That's for the courts to decide. But the NBA's response, the way it handled the optics, the total lack of suspension or even hesitation in letting that money keep flowing, that's the part people won't forget, because that says everything. And Sophie Cunningham, she didn't have to say a word. She could have stayed quiet, let the media circus pass her by, and gone back to focusing on her own game. But she didn't. She stood up, she spoke out, and she made people uncomfortable. That's what leadership actually looks like. The Terry Rozier situation is just the tip of the iceberg. What Sophie Cunningham really exposed is the way professional sports leagues, especially the NBA, treat accountability like a PR checkbox. Something to perform, not something to enforce. And people are tired of it. Let's be honest. When a player gets hit with federal gambling charges, that's not something you just sweep under the rug. That's not, oops, we'll handle internally. That's serious. It's the kind of charge that doesn't just land out of nowhere. The federal government doesn't play around with indictments unless they're extremely confident in the evidence. So when the NBA says, our internal investigation found nothing, it immediately raises red flags. Because either the league's investigation wasn't thorough, or was never intended to be. This is why Sophie's comment struck such a nerve. It's not just that Rozier is being paid despite the charges. It's that the NBA is standing by him without blinking, as if the legal system just doesn't exist. The league's silence is louder than anything they could have said. And Cunningham? She did what so many athletes are afraid to do. She named the elephant in the room. She questioned the system. And in doing so, she exposed how fragile the league's reputation for integrity really is. This isn't the first time a league has tried to protect its own. It's not the first time an athlete's off-court behavior has clashed with the league's carefully controlled image. But the difference now? People are watching. Social media doesn't let these stories disappear anymore. And Sophie knew exactly what she was doing when she tweeted, "Life isn't fair," because that simple line carried weight. It wasn't just frustration. It was a direct call out of a system that punishes some and protects others, depending on their paycheck, gender, and headline potential. There's a reason the conversation quickly shifted to include everything from salary disparities to systemic sexism to the way leagues handle investigations. Once you start pulling at one thread, the whole fabric starts to unravel. And the money part? Oh, that stings the most. Terry Rozier is set to earn $26 million while he's under federal investigation. Meanwhile, Sophie Cunningham, an accomplished pro in her own right, is part of a league where even the highest paid players barely crack six figures. And that's not just frustrating. That's insulting. Especially when you consider the standards women athletes are held to. They're expected to be role models, activists, elite performers, and brand ambassadors without making waves. The minute someone like Sophie speaks out, she's labeled as divisive. But when male athletes break the rules, suddenly everyone wants to wait for due process. Why is due process a shield for some and a punishment for others? It's this inconsistency that's driving people up the wall. Fans aren't dumb. They see the contradiction. They see leagues throw the book at lower-level players while protecting stars with million-dollar contracts and built-in media defenses. And let's be real, this isn't about guilt or innocence. This is about standards, about how leagues choose to enforce their codes of conduct when it's convenient and ignore them when it's not. The message the NBA is sending right now is loud and clear. As long as you're valuable, the rules don't really apply to you, and that's why this controversy isn't going away. Sophie Cunningham didn't just call out one injustice. She peeled back the curtain on how professional sports still protect their own at the expense of everyone else. Players like her are supposed to shut up and dribble, but she didn't, and she won't. And now, the whole sports world has to deal with the mess. Because here's the reality. The Terry Rozier case is still unfolding. No one knows what the outcome will be. But the process? That's already under fire. And it should be. Fans deserve transparency. Athletes deserve fairness. And leagues that profit off morality speeches and community initiatives should be held to the same standards they preach. So now the question is, will the NBA step up? Or will they keep protecting their stars while letting the rest of the world clean up their mess? One thing's for sure, Sophie Cunningham isn't afraid to ask that question out loud. And neither should we. If you got thoughts on this, now's the time. Do you think the NBA is sweeping things under the rug? Is Sophie Cunningham getting unfair blowback? And should leagues be forced to pause contracts when players are facing federal charges? We want to hear from you. Drop a comment. Let's get into it. Hit that like button if you think the system needs a serious reset. And subscribe if you're here for the chaos. Because trust us, there's always another scandal coming.